Hi guys, so we finished up chapter 1 yesterday when we took our chapter 1 test. Today, if you'll please, we're going to do chapter 2 notes. If you'll please make your heading chapter 2, section 1. We're going to talk about the origins of American government, or how the American government originated. Here are the objectives of this section. Here are some definitions if you need those for later on, when you have questions or when you have your study guide for your test. More key terms, words, and their definitions. Here's the answer to your focus question for today. What ideas and traditions influenced government in the English colonies, so in the early colonies before we were the Americas? So some of the things that the colonists brought with them: the idea of ordered government, limited government, and a representative government. They also based their ideals off of certain documents from England, which include the Magna Carta, the Petition of Rot, and the English Bill of Rights. Alright, so this is where our first note begins. So our new heading is the concepts of government. Remember, you can abbreviate government this way. These are your notes, so please abbreviate, make them shorter as you need to. So the English colonists brought with them political ideas that have developed over centuries in England. So they brought with them some ideas from England. One of those things is the rule of law. The rule of law. Again, if I'm going too fast, please pause yourself, take your note, and then go push play. They also got influence from ancient Romans and English documents. We are going to write these definitions down because they're important. These are the key political concepts. So these are the three concepts that the English brought with them when they began to colonize the Americas. So the first one we're going to write down is ordered government. It is local governments should be divided into units and ruled by officers according to law. The second type of government is a limited government. Individual citizens have basic rights, limits on government power. The last type of government is a representative government. It should serve the will of the people. What that means is that people should have a say in what the government does or does not do. Remember, you're only writing down the things that I'm underlining. So this is the first document that greatly influenced the English colonists that they brought with them from England, and it is the Magna Carta. What you need to know is that it's from 1215. And its purpose was to put limits on the power of the king. The Englishmen felt that the king had too much power, and they wanted to limit that power. The Magna Carta guaranteed certain rights. For example, trial by jury. Over time, these rights were extended to all people, not just the privileged and the noble. So where does that sound a lot like? We have that same fundamental in our Constitution. So the Magna Carta was the first document that would have been important to the English. Another document that the Englishmen brought with them, the Petition of Rot. It was signed by King Charles II. All you need to know here is 1628. What did it do? It banned the king from imprisoning or punishing people without first following the laws of the land. So it pretty much said that the king also had to follow the laws, that he could not just punish people because he wanted to. He too had to follow the rules. It also kept the king from declaring military rule. And the other part you need to know here is that the king could not declare to make people house soldiers. It said that the Englishmen did not have to house soldiers in their homes and feed them if they did not want to. This is in our Constitution today. And it also required the consent of Parliament for taxation. So the king couldn't just take money and decide to tax. He had to have permission from the government. So these are the documents that started to limit the power of the monarch or the king or queen in England at this time. The final document that influenced the English colonies is the English Bill of Rights. Now, we have a Bill of Rights in our Constitution. This is the English Bill of Rights. You need to know that it was drawn up by Parliament, so that this is the English government. So the government decided to prevent the abuse of power by all future monarchs, kings or queens. The Parliament said they're having too much power, they're using too much power, and we've got to take some of that power away. And by creating the English Bill of Rights, they were able to take away some of the power. It required the consent of Parliament, like I said earlier, for taxation, and it promised the right to a fair trial and petition the monarchy to correct injustices. So now we get to American rights. We're not going to write anything down on this, but in this table, it shows the things that they have in common. The Magna Carta, the English Bill of Rights, the Virginia Bill of Rights, which was in the United States, and then the U.S. Constitution. So you can see that the Virginia Bill of Rights and the United States Constitution Bill of Rights are exactly the same. You can see how they each kind of built on each other. All right, your next heading here is the 13 colonies. The colonies were established over a span of 129 years. I'm sorry, 125 years. Virginia was the first colony. Georgia was the last. The colonies were more similar than they were different. They were more similar than they were different. Each colony was established on the basis of a charter granted by the king. These charters granted some governing authority to the colonies, but kept some authority to the king. There are 3 types of colonies. We're going to flip back and forth between slides here, so bear with me. So your next heading, 3 types of colonies. The first type of colony are royal colonies, and they were directly controlled by the king, hence the name royal colonies. I'm going to scroll down here to where we can discuss the royal colonies a little bit. So they were ruled by the king, and the governor of that colony was appointed by the king. All of the colonial legislature was appointed by the king. And then they did have some representation. The lower house of the legislation was elected by colonists who owned enough property to vote. That's what you need to know about the royal colonies. The second type of colony was a proprietary colony. So proprietary colonies were run by a proprietor chosen by the king. So this one was completely ran by the king. The king still has power, but not as much. So what do we need to know about proprietary colonies? The governor was appointed by the king, but the proprietor of that was appointed by the governor. They were run much like royal colonies. Not a lot of difference between royal colonies and proprietor colonies. Of the proprietary colonies, Pennsylvania had an unusually democratic government with a unicameral legislature. So Pennsylvania had a democratic government. Even though it was ran by the monarchy or the king, it was very democratic in its ideals. All right, our last type of colony we're going to look at is the charter colonies. So charter colonies were run mainly by elected legislators and were the most independent. So they did not rely on the king. They weren't run by the king like the rest of the colonies were. They had more independence than the rest of the colonies. So if we go look at what do we need to know about a charter colony, the governors were elected by property-owning colonists. The elected legislator could pass laws. So the elected legislator could pass laws without the approval of the king. Judges were appointed by the legislator. Virginia and Massachusetts each had their charters revoked and had to become royal colonies. So these were the least controlled by the king. The last thing you need to know here is that charter colonies enjoyed the most freedoms. They were the most free. So least controlled by the king. You will need to know the differences between these colonies, so make sure that you write these notes and save these notes. And that is the end of Chapter 1, Section 1 notes.